Good morning, everybody. As we go to the Chitas of today, we are holding Wednesday, the fourth reading in the portion of Rishlach. We're holding on chapter 14, verse number 26. And God spoke to Moshe saying, how much longer can I tolerate this evil congregation? Which come and complain against me. The complaints of the Jewish people that complain against me, Shemaiti, I've heard. Rashi says, these are the spies. There were 10. There were 12 spies, 10 against 2. So you have 10. So Higmara says, Mikan le'eda, here we know in the Torah that an Eda, community, congregation, is 10. Hashem Malinim, who cause others to complain. The Jews, not only they complain, they made the other people complain. As Tlunis b'nei Yisrael Shehema, Havadaglim Alinim Oisam Alai, the spies caused them to complain against me. Shamaiti, I've heard. Verse 28, Emalehem, tell them, Chayani, I swear on my, so to say, on my life, Yom Hashem, Im loy kashadibaitim ba'oznai, exactly what you said, Kain esalachem. Exactly what you asked for, that's what I'll give you. Rashi says, Chayani loshen shvua, this denotes a concept of an oath. Im loy esakain, if I don't do so. Chayani, so to say, it will be as I don't live chas v'shalom. So therefore, exactly what you say is I'll do. Rashi says, it says that you wish to me, or if only you'll die in the desert. So you want to die here? So that's exactly whatever you ask. Here we see that the Eibishter does exactly what a person wants. He wants good, he receives good. He wants bad, he receives bad. Therefore, you asked that you wanted to die in the desert, so you'll die in the desert. To whoever was counted a tally of 20 years and above, which complained against me. So all those that are 20 years and above, the 600,000 that we counted, will die in the desert. She says, all who are counted to any tally where you are counted, such as enrolling in the army of the service or for the contribution of the shekel, all those counted these tallies will die. And they are for those of 20 years and above, thus excluding the tribe of Levi, who are not counted from 20 years and above. So the tribe of Levi, all the women, and all the men younger than 20. So all the men 20 years and above will die. It's exactly what you wanted. I first swear that you will not enter the land. That this nation will not go into the land. Besides Kaleb, the son of Yefunah, Yeshua ben Nun, and Yeshua the son of Nun. Tapchem and all your children. Which you said, Lavazia, that will be to waste, God forbid. I'll bring them into this land, and they will know the land, them which you hated, which you despise. And your corpses will fall in this desert. Uncle is translated but your own corpses. Since he had just spoken about bringing the children to the land, and he wished to say that you, unconscious, will die, the word atem is appropriate to be used in this case. Atem. Verse 33: B'nechem you royim b'midbar, and your children will wander in this desert. Aboim shana for 40 years. V'nasu ezunasechem, and it will carry your guilt atem pigrechem until the last man standing will die. B'midbar, in this desert. Ash says this was a bracha for the Jews in that time. They didn't die young. Now, none of them died below the age of 60. every one of them lived to the age of 60. For this reason, definitely 40 years were decreed because there were some 20-year-olds. So those who were 20 years old at that time would reach 60. For the first, that's why it's a big celebration in general when you reach the year 60. First year after leaving Egypt was included in this reckoning, although it preceded the sending of the spies, because this decree was conceived already from when they made the golden calf. This already started off. Abish already had this. That's why everything is connected to the golden calf, really. So everything started 50 days after they left Egypt. But God waited for them, postponing the decree until the measure of sin accumulated. This is then what it says: on the day of my reckoning with the spies, I'll bring them to account the sin of the golden calf. Here too it says, you will bear your iniquities. Not your iniquity, but your iniquities, your sins. The two iniquities, the two sins that were terrible to God, which was the golden calf, Avodah Zarah, and here the spies complaining against Esau, Lashon Hara. He reckoned the count of the lifetime as part of the full year of a year as a full, so that when they entered the 60th year, those who were 20 years old at the time of the decree, they died as they entered the 60th year. So really, that's why really you enter the 60th year when you become 59. You enter the 60th year. That's why the Tillim of the year is already the 60. You say you're 59 years old, you say the chapter 60 in Tillim, because you're entering the 60th year. Even though you're 59, you're entering that year. Nasser is in the Sechem. She says, and it will bear your string. Its meaning is, as Onkelos translates, you'll bear your guilt. You'll carry. So there were some people who lived for another 40 years in the desert. And this was important, these 40 years ultimately, because the whole previous generation taught the future generation. They sat, what did they sit in the desert? They sat and they learned Torah in the desert. So they sat with Moshe and Aaron, because Moshe and Aaron lived with the Jews in the desert for 40 years. And Moshe and Aaron passed away the year before the 40th year, in the 40th year. So this was all. Ultimately was turned into a positive thing to the Jewish nation, that they were together for 40 years, and the elders, the previous generation, taught the next generation Torah, and they were ready ultimately after 40 years, because it shows that the Jewish people were not ready at this time to go into Eretz Yisrael for whatever reason. They didn't want to go. They were not ready, and this 40-year process was to get the next generation ready, that when they came into Eretz Yisrael, they would be already steeped in Torah and knowledge and great understanding and mitzvahs, etc. And the punishment according to the number of days that you went to spy out the land. 40 days, I'll give 1 day to year. So you'll carry this for 40 years. And you'll know the extent of my alienation from me. Now she says, my alienation means that you have removed your heart from following me. It turns to una, to need some removal. Stated regarding the annulment of vows. It says, Ki hinia avi isa, later on, the father hindered. See, the word hinia, tenuasi, that you hinder, you alienated yourself from me. You decided to go against me. And verse 35, Ani Hashem dibarti, I'm God, I have spoken. I'm nothing if I'll not do this. But I've said, to this whole evil congregation, to come against me by midbar in the desert, has a yitamu, will come to an end, v'sham yamusu, and there they will die. Verse 36, and these 10 guys, which Moshe Rabbeinu sent to spy out the land, they came and they returned to me, to us, as Kala Eda Lahutzi, to the kind congregation, Lahutzi Dibba al to speak evil against the land. Now she says, when they returned, caused the entire community to complain against him, meaning, and when they returned from inspecting the land, they caused the entire community to complain against him by spreading their reports. Those men died. They all died right away. They had a plague and they were killed at that spot. The term Hoitzi Diba, Rashi says, denotes an intention of words. That people accustom their speech to speak in a particular of a particular person, as in arousing doivev, the moving of lips. The term may be used for good or bad. So the way the people talk, it's all the way you talk. And therefore, as they say, the next verse, Moitzi Diba Ra, who spread evil report about the land. The word for there, the word Diba, that is also Dibas, that is good. So we have the Diba is words. Words can be used for the good, and words for the words can be used for the bad. Diba, actually, utterances. Diba. It's an interesting word, Diba. It's not a normal Diber. It's just Daber, Diba. That's what Rashi gives these explanations to the word Diba. Verse number 37. And these men who spread the evil report about the land, these 10 guys, they died b'magefa in a plague. God plagued them by magefa and Hashem. Now she says, the Torah doesn't say what the magefa was. Rashi means on the Gemara. Gemara says, by the means of the death suited to them, measure for measure, they sinned with their tongue. So their tongue unrolled down to their navel, and worms came out of their tongue and entered in the navel. Ooh, that sounds a little okay. And it is therefore says b'magefa, in the plague, and not b'magefa, not b'magefa. And that is means before God, meaning that the death suited to them by the attribute of the Holy One, blessed be He, who appropriates punishment measure for measure. So it's not just a magefa; it's a certain magefa. That not just there's a plague. Eibishter gives when he punishes a person, God forbid, it's a measure for measure. Besides the two guys, Yeshua ben Nun and Kaleb ben Yefuna, Chayim and Anashei, the daughters, they lived, they remained from those who went out to scout the land. Rashi says, Mata Malema. What does the Torah say? Chayim and Anashei remained alive. We know that already. Torah says that already. Only in order to teach us that they received the land and inheritance rights of the right of the spies. That's what it means. It means that they took over the spies' land. They received that portion, and thus stood instead of these entering the land alive. That's what it means. That they not only survived and they lived, but they also received the portions of these 10 guys. Moshe Rabbeinu spoke all these words to the Jewish people, and now the people realized their mistake. And the people mourned greatly. And they got up in the morning. They went up. They decided to leave, to go. They said, we made a mistake. We're going up to the land. Hashem, we're going up to the land which God have told us. We have sinned. She says this was the route leading to the land of Eretz Yisrael. Hashem, which God which God said to give it to us. We're going up. We made a mistake. This was a boo-boo. Ki chatanu, by which we said is not better to return to Egypt. Not only did we say we're not going to the land, we said chas v'shalom. We added that we're going back to Egypt. We want to die in the desert. For verse 41, Moshe said, now you're going against God again. It's not going to succeed. That which you aim to, you'll not succeed. So you're going against God again. So therefore, you're not going to gain anything at this present time. Al talu, don't go anywhere. God is not amongst you. If you go up, you will be beaten by your enemies. Because the Amalekim and the Canaanites are what the spies said, they were right. The Amalekim and the Canaanim, they're right in front of you. If you don't go with God's will, you're gonna all die in the sword. That's where you went against God. And God is not going to be with you. So that's just for this will be for you because you returned away from God. So therefore, you're going on your own. You're not going to survive. Verse 44, but they defiantly ascended the mountain. But the ark of God, the ark of covenant, did not, and Moshe Rabbeinu did not move from the camp. Yeah, Pilu Rashi says they defiantly ascended, term denoting force. And Rashi shows different places that Oifel, that the word Yapilu, just translate the word Yapilu, means arrogantly against the wishes of Moshe Rabbeinu, against the wishes of God. Verse 45, and the Amalekites and the Canaanites came. They came out and they smote them and they crushed them, pursuing them until Cherma. Now she says, first of all, the word Vayaktitum is a crushing, ekos. And number two, Cherma, the name of it means destruction. A place was now so named because of that event where the Jewish people, mainly, I think it's brought down to mainly the tribe of Ephraim, who went out and decided to go to the land. Chapter 15, verse number 1. God said to Moshe, saying, tell the Jewish people, here you see the beauty of the story, that even though after the story, the Abish says, don't worry, we'll ultimately come into this land. When you come with Shem in 40 years from now, you're going to come into the land, which I'm giving to you. Ash said he reassured them. Imagine the whole community must have been an uproar. Now they know they're all going to die in the desert. 600,000 men, the generation, this was the generation that came out of Mitzrayim. And so I'm sure the kids were all frightened. Maybe they're not going to either come into the land. Maybe they're all going to die in the desert. So here the Eibishter promised them that don't worry, that in Mir Hashem, we're going to come into the land of Eretz Yisrael. And you'll make Mir Hashem offerings to God. Don't worry. You're going to send offerings, feast offerings, to fill the Ark of God, in time of your celebrations. To bring an offering, a pleasing offering to God, whether it's from the herd, or it's from the flock. Now she says, this is not a command, that you have to, whether you wish, after your arrival there, to bring a firing offering. A pleasing aroma, one that gives me pleasure. Again, she says, carbon is a nachas ruach. As the Abish says, or you offer fire, it fulfills your festival obligation. I command you to do the festivals. It's a nachas ruach shamarti v'naser tzoni, that I have asked you to when you're in the holidays, the 3 holidays, me'adechem, and the 3 holidays, you should come to the Beis Hamikdash and bring us a carbon chagiga. So I'm happy that I've asked, and you are following through in that obligation. Verse number 4, and the one who brings the offering to God has to bring mincha, has to always bring a mincha, a meal offering. Seilas, isarim, belulu, b'deviyasahin, shemen, which is at least 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with a 1/4 of hin of oil. She says, meaning you must bring a libation of grain offering for each animal. That was the obligation. The grain offering would be entirely burnt with the oil mixed in it. And the wine, there's also libation of wine. So there's a meal offering. So in essence, every animal came with a meal offering and a wine offering. The wine would be poured into the basin situated in the altar. As we learn, you can learn this all in Masechta Sotah. Yayin l'nesach, here's the pasuk of Yayin l'nesach v'yasehin. You must offer a 1/4 hin of wine. Tasa la'oila, which is brought upon the ascent offering, a lazavach, or a feast offering, lakeves echat, for each lamb. Rashi says this refers to everything stated above. The grain offering and the oil and the wine need to be brought with every carbon, so that it has a mincha and it's called nesachim, a wine libation. Verse number 6. Oil ayal tasa mincha, also to a ram you should make a meal offering. Shnei Yisraelim, over there you have to bring two ephahs, belulu b'Hashem, mixed oil. Shlishin, a third of a hin of oil. She says it means if it's a ram. Our rabbis expound in addition, include the law that a palgas, an animal in the 13th month, in the intermediate stage between a lamb and a ram, also requires the la'ayel, because a ram is regularly over two in the second year. So over here, if it's that month, it's still considered a second year. It requires a libation and a meal offering. Verse number 7, V'yayil and nesach shlisha hin, and a third of the hin of wine as a libation for the ayil. Takiv, you should bring reach nechoyach lavaya. It's a pleasing. It's offered this to please. It's a pleasing aroma to God. And that's as long as we end it off in a good concept. The whole story of the Meraglim, we ended off that the Mitzvah Hashem will celebrate in the Beis Hamikdash, and the Mitzvah Hashem we also will celebrate. All of us will celebrate in the Beis Hamikdash. We are holding, and I do after yesterday I looked it up. We learned yesterday's Tanya twice. I apologize. So while I was learning it, I was saying I think I recognize this. So we learned it twice. Must be some divine reason that we needed to learn it twice. Okay, Shariyicha V'Emunah, we're holding in the middle of the chapter. I have to always look at the date. Today is the 22nd day of Sivan, so I know we're holding on today's date. Now, everything that we have explained, Yuva Mashakasa will understand the statement that says, Ani Havaya, I am God, Loi Shanisi, I am not changed. This means not only that there's no change in God's conduct or even his will with regard to rewarding the righteous and so on, but this verse, that's what the word Amen, Kel Melech Nemon. That means the Eibush doesn't change. When a word is a word. When the Gemara says, when the Eibush tells a person that his word should be a word, God himself does exactly the same. A word is a word. You have the expression over here in the today's Chumash, I need the Baitim Lo Yasisi. When I speak, I do. And that's the Eibush. What he speaks, he does. Lo Shanisi. But it's more than that over here, self-understood. We self-understood. We trust God, what he says he does, and that every person should do that. So not only God rewarding the righteous, but the verse explicitly there means explicitly that there's no change in heaven for offending God. You cannot, a human being, there's change. Sometimes, thank God, there's change. There exists nothing that can alter him. The only consideration that might possibly cause one to wonder about these changes in God's unity is his bringing created beings into existence. Before creation, nothing whatsoever existed other than him. After their creation, however, one might erroneously conclude that there now exists something in additional to him. The various worlds, the densiness. And were this to be so, this would constitute a change in God's absolute unity. Heaven forbid. So that's the struggle that we have. Because the second you say that we do consist as our own entity, so that means that there's some change in God's entity. We have another entity. The second you have another entity, then that entity is different than the original entity. So how do you deal with these two things? That's the paradox that Chassidus always deals with, this concept. You are something, but you're really nothing. So are we something or are we nothing? The verse therefore anticipates by saying, therefore, you have to make one concept, and that has to be clear by everybody. And that is that the Eibishter doesn't change. That's for sure one thing. There's no changing God, human creation, good, bad. That's an expression. Does it make a difference to God? You're good or you're bad? It doesn't. It doesn't change anything. I mean, sure, God wants good, but does it change in him anything? Nothing changes God. He just had an expression of it. It's a pleasing aroma. That means there was no pleasing aroma beforehand. The Eibishter needs your aroma. That means if the second you say God needs this aroma, then it means that he's missing something. And he's waiting for this aroma, this pleasing aroma. Then that means there is a change. That is an expression of change. Therefore, you cannot say that chas v'shalom. All these, as the Gemara says openly, the Torah talks koloshim b'nei adam. The Torah talks in the knowledge of man, but men, human beings have to come to a conclusion. Ani Hashem lo shanisi. That I am God. I don't change. Nothing changes in God. Meaning she'ein shum shinu klal. There's no change in God. What does it mean? To the Eibishter, creation and before creation are the exact same. Because thus as God is before, there was nothing in creation but God himself, and creation is still God himself. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu says. Ein Movade. Even after creation, Ein Oid Movade. There's nothing but God. Now, superficially, this is difficult to understand. This is not explain this to a rational person. It doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. It's difficult to understand. How is it possible to say that God is alone before the world was created and he's now just alone afterwards? There's something, there's a world. So how can you say that he's alone? He's not alone. There's a world. There's not only this world, there's upper worlds. You're going into the many worlds. And every world, what do you mean is alone? He has all these worlds. So he's not alone. So these worlds are there. However, according to explain given here regarding the divine unity, if you understand Yechudi Ilah, if you understand the statement, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, then you'll understand this. You'll understand that even with all these worlds, there's only one thing in all these worlds, and that's the Creator, that's God. So really, there is nothing in this world but God. Everything you see in the world is God. Since the world is truly nullified and it's entirely in its entirety in relation to Him and is wholly united with God, God is united with the world. God is thus truly alone after the world was created, as He's alone prior to the creation of the world. And that's what you say every morning. The Eibush doesn't change. The world doesn't change. All these worlds don't change anything within Him. That's what we say. You were the same before the creator of the world, and you are the same after the creator of the world. That has to be the foundation. You got to start from that. You got to comprehend that concept to the best of each person, to the best of his ability, to understand what that means. So, if the meaning of the passage is you're only God, God's eternal without being or end, could have been say that you were before the world was created. Why did it come back and say you was after the world was created? The emphasis provided by the repeated phrase "you are who" means you're exactly the same. That's the point. The point is not that you're infinity and we're finite. No, the point is you are infinite and finite, and you're the same as in the finite. You're the same as in the infinite, and you're the same as in the finite. In the infinite is before the God created the world. In the finite is after the created world. You are the same. In the finite, you are the same. That is the concept. That is Emunas Hashem, that the Eibishter is finite in this, the Eibishter is infinite in this finite world. Not only is it infinite, Bilishum Shinui, there's no difference where God is in the infinite as He's in the finite. Nor in His knowledge. That means the Torah, which is the wisdom of God, is in the way it's in God's wisdom. In the way it's in the infinite wisdom of God, it's now in the pasuk that we've learned. One might suppose that the creation of the world, God's knowledge underwent a change, in so much that He could not possibly know the world beforehand. Once the world was created, God would thus know something that previously did not, chas v'shalom. Therefore, the Alter Rebbe tells that God's knowledge was not changed at all. Why? Because God, knowing himself, knows everything. Because everything comes from God's knowledge. Everything comes from God's knowledge. Everything is in God's knowledge. Everything is nullified to God's knowledge. So creation thus adds nothing to God's knowledge. This knowledge of self-existence before creation, and is with this prior knowledge that he knows all creation. As the Rambam writes, Maimonides, who was a theorist, who was a person who took everything in with knowledge, wrote, the Eibishter, he is the knower, he is the known, he is the knowledge itself. So by a human being, you have three different entities. There's the knower, there's what's known, and there is the knowledge. By the Eibishter, it's all one. And the Rambam writes, I was going to say in a second, that humans cannot comprehend this statement alone. So the radical difference between mortal knowledge, which comprises distinct elements, way the person, soul, the knower, be the subject that is known, and then you have the power of the knowledge that connects the subject to the person, the faculty of das. So you have three different entities in a human being. When it comes to knowledge, it's three different things, and that's why these three things have to come together in some kind of aspect. That's why das is solidifying these three things, which enables the knower to know the known. In the divine realm, all three elements are all one, all God. And Maimonides goes on to say that this is beyond the capacity of a mouth to express. This is easy to say, but it's not easy to comprehend. So therefore, the Rama was a great knowledge. It's like, I don't know, I can't even say it. Well, you're surely not the ear to hear this. And then even furthermore, forget about the saying it and hearing it. And not that the heart of man can understand, apprehend it clearly. How do you put that? How do you put the past, present, future as one? How do you put the know, the knowledge as one? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense in human comprehension. But we're talking about God. Because by God, his essence and being and his knowledge are all absolutely one. That's why it's a concept of echad, one. As the Rambam writes, there's no true unity in the world but God. Because God is one. Shem echad u'shmoi echad. The Eibishter is one, is total unity. That's the meaning of unity. This is called the Shar HaYichud ve'emunah. Because when you understand unity, you understand emunah. When you understand this concept of unity, that there's one concept in the world, and that's God. And the meaning of this unity, what God is, that God is above, he's below, there's no difference above and below by God. There's no difference to God, anything in the world. That's why we always say the shocking statement, good and bad. Right? When it comes to the story of Purim, we say you don't know the difference between the accursed Haman and the blessed Mordechai, because both of them, Haman and Mordechai, are both a creation of God. They're both created by God for a purpose. For a purpose. And they're all one concept. Ultimately, it comes in the world. Self-self, one is good and one is evil. So to us, we have to understand that concept. But by the Eibishter, it's all one. In all kinds of unity. And his knowledge is so superstandard to his essence, super added to his essence and being, that it's more that as it is an immortal soul. that whose knowledge is added to its essence and it's compounded with it. Because when a man studies a subject and knows it, your soul knew it already. So so the soul had already within him before he studied and knew it. And afterwards, this knowledge was added to his soul. Man's knowledge is thus a supplement to his instinct being. Through it, he becomes aware of something he did not know before. But by the Eibishter, what do you mean he did not know before? Everything is known. There's nothing by the Eibishter that's not known. Because everything comes from him. So how is it possible he didn't know it? Everything in the world comes from him. That's why we have the expression in the Torah where God says, let me go down and hear the cry of the Jewish nation. All the Mefarshim. What does that mean? The cry of the Jewish nation is because of him. Is from him. Not because he did something, because it's from him. They cry because he gives them that capability to cry. Everything we do is because of God's capability. But as the Gemara says, God does these things that humans should feel. Wow, the Eibishter has to come and listen. When we cry to God, we're crying from him. When we are happy, we're happy from him. And so after days, day after day, Yomi Medaberu, so to say, they speak, its expression. The day speak, meaning instructed a person. And the multitude of years teach wisdom. And this is not simply, meaning perfect unity. This is all murkeves. This is all brought about. This is bringing more and more and more as we grow. We teach ourselves more things and become smarter and smarter and smarter. This is all added. We're adding day to day. Hopefully, it says every person in Avram Avinu came with his days. Alter Rebbe means that the following: although man's knowledge too is united with him, with his soul, for it's the person himself who knows. Nevertheless, this is not a perfect unity, for simple implies that any alternative would have been inconceivable. Since a man's knowledge is acquired, not having part of his essential being, its acquisition yields an imperfect and a composite form of unity. A unity can comprise of two separate entities that come together. But ultimately, it's two separate entities. There's the knower and the knowledge. So therefore, even the person who has das, ultimately das is the concept of uniting with the thing. But ultimately, you're still uniting with something that is separate from you. You can't say this on God. So even if you're going to go to the highest level of a human being, which is a soul, which seemingly the soul, the knower, comes to the knowing that he ultimately has das, he has wisdom, he can come to something and come to recognition that his soul can connect with it. But ultimately, and your soul is united with it. But still, it's not the unity of God. It's not the same unity of God. So that's why the Rambam writes that there's no unity in this world but the unity of God. The Holy One, blessed be He, is a perfect unity. Belishim Arkava, there's no concept of connections, Arkava compositions, Vitzad or elements, Ribui plurality. There's no concept of bringing things together, uniting things. That's not what the Eibush does. The Eibush is one entity. It's a simple, the way it's simple concept of total oneness. Everything comes from Him. Everything is known by Him. It's there because it's known by Him. It's not something that was previously that He found out about. In Cain's sense, since His unity is perfect and uncompounded, one cannot say that His knowledge is something a part of Him. That would simply heaven that from that would imply heaven forbid a composite. That his knowledge is super added to his essence, affecting a change within him. That's change. Something he didn't know, he now knows. Rather, you must conclude that his essence and his being and his knowledge, Hakol Dover Echad, absolutely one, Belisham Hakava, without any composition. And therefore, Ulaficha, Keshem Shiefshel of Shum Nivra, Boil Lahasig Muhusa Beta Vatsmusay. Therefore, just as it's impossible for any creation, any human being, for sure, in the world, to comprehend the essence of the Creator, Vatzmus and his being, so too, it's impossible to comprehend the essence of his knowledge, which is one with himself. You cannot comprehend God, you cannot comprehend his knowledge. And that's why you need emunah. To believe, it's possible only to believe with a faith that transcends intellect and comprehension. Shakadosh Baruch Hu Yachid Miyuchad, that the Holy One, blessed be He, is one and unique. In so much as faith transcends intellect, it is able to apprehend the truth that lies behind the providence of the mortal intellect. And that's the concept of Jewish people's emunah. Who v'daita kolecha mamishim, and his knowledge is absolutely one. And knowing himself, v'dias atzmei, so to say, knowing himself, maki v'dei kol al-mitzayim, the Eibishter perceives and knows all the higher and lower beings, meaning the beings in the higher and the lower worlds. Ad shel shilshush cotton piyan, even the smallest worm in the sea. Bad yitush cotton, to a minute mosquito. Shubetabar or which was found in the center of the earth, all comes from God's knowledge. Ain't dover nelam, nothing is hidden from him, because if he wasn't because of his knowledge, that mosquito would not be here, would not be here, would not be in existence. And number two, and this knowledge does not add multiplicity or compositions within him, since it's only knowledge of himself. And being and his being and his knowledge are all one. Thus, by knowing himself, he knows all created beings that derive their existence from him and that are totally nullified to him and unified with him. The fish is so much as the form to understand this concept is very difficult for us to envision this concept. Therefore, Isaiah, the prophet, said, just like the heavens are higher than the earth, so too my ways are higher than your ways, and my thought for your thought. So as much as humanity wants to travel in the heavens and go send up telescopes further and further and further, ultimately there's no end over there. So too, there's no end. You're not going to get it. As the prophet says, can you intellectually search God and you'll find him? Have you eyes of flesh, and do you see as man sees? When a person sees something, when a person knows something, when a person sees and knows everything with a knowledge that is external of him, and hence something is added to him with his knowledge. But the Eibishter is Yedias Atzmei. He knows everything by knowing himself. This is all Alter Rebbe brought. This is all the lashon of the Zohar. Ayin Sham Ilchi said Atera. This is Maimonides. I'm sorry. This is all Maimonides. Alter Rebbe wrote a big part of Maimonides over here. Ayin Sham Ilchi said Atera. The Maimonides put this all in the foundations of the Torah. The Maimonides put this whole thing in the foundations of the Torah. That to know, to be able, when you come to Torah, you have to have certain yesodis. You have to have certain foundations. You have to have certain concepts before you learn Torah. Because if you don't believe in this, then what are you going to open the book? It's not a book, a regular book where you're going to read some kind of historical book or some kind of book of knowledge. This is the knowledge of God. So you have to first establish your emunas Hashem. V'skim v'kach Kabbalah, and the sages of the Kabbalistic sages agreed with him. Pardes by Ramak Zachlin Bracha is brought down in the Pardes of the Koravoy in Blessed Memory. So why did Alter Rebbe say this? Because, as it says over here, there are a number of sages who sharply disagreed with the Rambam, and they claim that no descriptive term may be applied to God. This is a big argument, and the Ravid writer writes in the Rambam. And those who argue with the Rambam say, don't even mention God as Chachma, Bina, Das, is all things are, don't even mention it. Not even knowledge, and not even the form of knowledge. So ratified that it's completely beyond the realm of human experience. To say that God is the knower and the knowledge, the Rambam writes, the Ravid writes in the Rambam, you say that God is the knower and knowledge, which cannot comprehend. So why are you saying it for? Since it cannot comprehend it, don't say it. God is not knowledge. God is not the knower. God is above all human expressions. And therefore, don't even give a human expression to God. The Rambam disagreed with him. And as the Alter Rebbe says, Chachma Kabbalah also disagreed agreed with the Rambam and disagreed with the other sages. And they said, no, the Torah does call the Eibush to Chachma. And the Torah does call the Eibush to Gevura. And we'd say that davening, God will give. So therefore, we're not using terms that you came up with. The great sages that Arizal, who brought the Esesvidus, spoke about he brought it from a pasuk. It's all related to the Torah. So we all connected to the Torah the way God expresses himself. So according to the Kabbalah, however, Maimonides is indeed correct. And again, that's why Chas v'sholom, we're not allowed, even Mani says you cannot use human terms to God. It's only that the Eibush talks to us and we need to comprehend, we talk in human terms. But Chas v'sholom, we understand that the Eibush is above Chachma. My thought is not your thought. So how can even though we say God is wisdom, it's God is wisdom the way we comprehend wisdom. But self-understood, the Eibush is above and beyond. The wisdom of God is above and beyond our wisdom. This is only so we agree with the Kabbalah, and Chassidus agrees with the Rambam. This is only after Ein Sof has undergone. That's why the whole concept of Tzimtzum is important in Kabbalah and Chassidus. So the other great sages of the times said, we want to talk to God the way He's above Tzimtzum. We don't want to bring Tzimtzum into the whole picture, and therefore, we want to separate the two issues, and that's it. This is only after Tzimtzum, until it's able to guard itself the Siddur of Chachma, Bina, and Das, and the will of Atzilus. And that stage in Atzilus is truly says that God is the knower and the knowledge, and so much the attribute of Atzilus are completely united with the Seif Baruch Hu. And therefore, even in Atzilus, the world of emanation is still, the unity of God is still there in its full glory, and therefore over there it's totally united in the way it is in that realm. And that completes the chitas for today. Second. Today is the 22nd day of the month, which is chapter 106 and 107. If you do those two chapters, the 22nd day of the month, you do the chitas of the day. The Rebbe writes the Minhag Chabad by the Shema and the Yom Yom today. The Minhag Chabad, how you hold your tzitzis, you kiss your tzitzis during the Shema. So the Rebbe writes the Ava Salem, in Ava Salem, when we start the blessing before the Shema, the words of Yenu L'Shalom, when we say those words, that's when we bring the tzitzis together. We bring the two front corners, then join the tzitzis of the two back corners. Then the tzitzis, the right corner, holding them together. We take all the four tzitzis right before the Shema, and we put it in between our finger, the little finger, and the ring finger in the left hand. And then during the Shema, we kiss the tzitzis 6 times. The word tzitzis, 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 and MS, that's in the last paragraph. And then the next paragraph, Kayemes and Layad, we kiss it another 2 times. So we kiss the tzitzis 6 times. Some people put the tzitzis on their eyes and then kiss the tzitzis. And that's what the Rebbe used to do. He used to put his tzitzis in the eyes and then kiss it. And that's what he did. Showed when if you were by the Rebbe's davening, he doesn't mention it here, but that's what the Rebbe did. Okay, and that completes that. I want to invite everybody. You know that we have a wonderful class in halacha. We're doing it today. We're doing it tonight because the women have the last class tomorrow night on the what's it called, Chodesh Society. So, Baruch Hashem, we have a nice group of women that come to the class on halacha new class. We're going to do the halacha new class tonight at 7:30 p.m. at Chabad. So I want to wish you all a wonderful and beautiful day. And we'll see you all in Mitcham tomorrow, 8 o'clock. We'll continue.
Rabbi, you do